What is up, Dynasty Leaguers? Welcome into today's YouTube video. I'm your boy Addison Hayes here to talk with you guys about my top 5 Dynasty wide receiver sells. This is going to be a continuation of last week's video where I talked about my top 5 wide receiver buys. So now we are going to do the sells that I believe that you should be looking to move in Dynasty. Now, a lot of these guys in this video are actually aging veterans who are starting to age out. Starting to turn 27, 28, 29 years old, stuff like that. But they still hold a lot of value in your Dynasty leagues. And these are just guys that maybe you're not actively looking to sell. Maybe you are actively looking to sell, but guys that need to be on your radar should trade offers come your way. And I'll explain everything about why I believe that they're sells and all that stuff in this video. So without further ado, let us get right into these sells. So the first name on this list is new Arizona Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. And we're starting this thing off with a bang and basically talking about the most valuable wide receiver on this list. Now, prior to being traded to the Arizona Cardinals, he probably would not have made this list as a dynasty sell, but now there are a lot of variables to consider with Nuke on a new team. First of all, he won't receive the same target share that he received in Houston, basically being a heavy target monster, never seeing less than 150 targets in a season since 2014. It's insane. He's basically, him and Julio and Antonio Brown ruled the entire last 5-6 years of the fantasy wide receiver space. So it's going to be weird to see him not only in a new jersey, but also weird to talk about him as a dynasty sell. Second of all, while Kyler Murray is on track to be a fantastic quarterback, I think he's definitely going to be. He is no Deshaun Watson, and that connection is probably not going to be there, at least immediately in the very short term. That connection that Hopkins and Kyler Murray are going to have is not going to be, or maybe potentially never will be, the same as what Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins had, where Watson basically was just like, screw it. Hopkins is down there somewhere. I'm going to throw it up to him. I'm going to know he's going to come down with it. And that is what I believe is not going to be there initially and might not ever be there in the same vein as what Watson was and the trust that Watson had for DeAndre Hopkins, for Kyler Murray, especially when you consider the other wide receivers on that team like Larry Fitzgerald, like Christian Kirk, Kenyon Drake out of the backfield, other wide receivers that Kyler Murray can depend on, whereas Watson might not have had those same players. You think of like Will Fuller, who was there for maybe half the season. After that, Kenny Stills, not much else going on there. So it was basically Deshaun Watson or throw it away or nothing else. So that is those are the two main big reasons why DeAndre Hopkins is a sell for me. But even if you don't agree with everything that I have said already on DeAndre Hopkins, if you believe that Kyler Murray is going to feed him, if you believe that that connection is going to be there, I mean, Hopkins is, yes, definitely still one of the most talented wide receivers in this league. But let's look at Hopkins through a dynasty lens. First of all, Nuke will be 28 years old when the 2020 season starts. In fact, when you're watching this, he might already have turned 28. His birthday is on June 6th. So if it's June 6th, happy birthday, DeAndre Hopkins. Happy birthday to you, 28 years old. But that is the age when in Dynasty, wide receivers basically receive their AARP memberships in the mail from the community. Now, when you look at Julio Jones's ADP history from DLF, you'll notice that when he turned 28 in 2017, that his value never rose again, despite being a perennial top 5 wide receiver in fantasy. And it's going to happen to DeAndre Hopkins as well, even if and when he produces with Arizona. Now, I would not be shocked to see and look at May 2021's ADP next year and see DeAndre Hopkins outside the top 5 wide receivers in Dynasty, behind guys like DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Tyreek Hill, maybe even potentially Juju and AJ Brown as well. Looking at DLF's Trade Finder, you can see Hopkins is still very valuable, but also a tradable asset. You can see trades like Hopkins for Josh Jacobs straight up, DJ Moore straight up, Chris Godwin straight up, A-Rob in the 109, and many, many more just like that. And it's always better to sell a year early than a year too late. And 2020 might just be the perfect time to move DeAndre Hopkins. Up next is another 27-year-old wide receiver in Cleveland Browns wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. Now, OBJ has been on a wild ride since being the #1 Dynasty asset for basically 3 years in a row to now barely being a top 10 Dynasty wide receiver. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised that he's still even top 10. While I believe 2020 will be a bounce back year for OBJ and Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns in general, we again have to consider not only OBJ's fantasy production, but also his future value within the Dynasty community. First of all, OBJ hasn't been a wide receiver 1 in fantasy since 2016. And while, yes, he was injured in 2017 and some of 2018 as well too, then switched to a new team in 2019, the fact remains that he hasn't been a fantastic asset on your teams from a fantasy perspective. Looking at just 2019, OBJ was a top 24 wide receiver or better in only 4 weeks, and really only one of those weeks was a week winning performance over 25 fantasy points. Looking again at OBJ's Dynasty ADP, and like I said before, I am shocked that he is still a top 10 wide receiver. There are a lot of names that would need just a solid 2020 season in order to jump OBJ. Guys like Kenny Golladay, Amari Cooper, DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton, CeeDee Lamb, and Calvin Ridley are all players within 9 spots of OBJ right now that could flip in 2021. The time to sell and get younger is now for OBJ, and DLF's Trade Finder shows me you can do just that with OBJ for Justin Jefferson and a 2021 first, OBJ for Terry McLaurin, OBJ in a 21 second for Calvin Ridley and a 2021 first, OBJ for Metcalf in 3 seconds, and many, many more. This may be your last opportunity to move OBJ, because if he fails to meet expectations again in 2020, then it's already game over. Number 3 on this list is another wide receiver on a new team in 2020, and new Buffalo Bills wide receiver Stefon Diggs, and he's a big time sell for me. Personally, I've never been a Diggs guy, even when he was all the rage back before Adam Thielen was a thing and like his sophomore year, 2016, stuff like that. He's just not the type of player that I wanted in fantasy at his cost on a year-to-year basis. Looking at his career stats, Diggs has just 2 1,000-yard seasons, both over the past 2 seasons, and only 1 top 18 fantasy year. Now, he moves to Buffalo, where he not only has to learn a new offense, a new system, everything else that goes along with it, but he also gets a massive downgrade at quarterback. Say what you want about Kirk Cousins, but he is nowhere near the same passer that Josh Allen is. He's substantially better than Josh Allen. According to Pro Football Focus, Josh Allen was second worst in the league in deep ball accuracy, which are passes of 20 or more air yards, with 30.9% completion percentage, compared to Kirk Cousins' 44.3% completion percentage on deep passes. So even though Diggs is now the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo, his quarterback situation is much worse. And let's not forget, Diggs was basically the wide receiver 1 in Minnesota last year, because Adam Thielen essentially only played in 7 games. Diggs finished as the wide receiver 21 last year in PPR formats and was only a wide receiver 2 or better in 5 games and a wide receiver 4 or worse in 8 games. That is not the production I want from my wide receiver 2, let alone a wide receiver 1 on my fantasy team. Using DLF's Trade Finder, here are some recent trades for Stefon Diggs. Diggs and a third for the 105, Diggs and Brandon Cooks for Julio and John Brown, Diggs for Christian Kirk and the 110, Diggs and Sammy Watkins for Allen Robinson, and so on and on and on. He might not be the easiest piece to move, especially for a good price initially, but he is someone that I would be actively shopping right now. The 4th guy on this list is a sad one for me to put on here, but LA Chargers wide receiver Keenan Allen has to be mentioned as a dynasty sell, which is a shame considering that Allen is coming off basically his 3rd straight season of 100 receptions, 1,200 yards, and 6 touchdowns, finishing again as a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. But times have changed over the past few months, and we need to be mindful of the future for Keenan Allen and this LA Chargers offense. In all honesty, the time to sell Keenan was probably in season 2019, as he is now at his lowest value in his entire career, but things could get worse for him as the year goes on. First, his fantasy production probably won't be what we're used to seeing from him, given that Tyrod Taylor is going to start the year at quarterback and Justin Herbert will more than likely finish it. I would not be surprised to see Keenan outside the top 15 wide receiver in fantasy for 2020, and that production is going to severely hurt Keenan Allen's dynasty value. Additionally, he just turned 28, which I've already said is basically dynasty retirement for a wide receiver. So I believe now is the time to cut the cord before he weighs you down even more, and then you're basically stuck with him. Looking at DLF's trade finder, and you'll see, much to my surprise, a good many trades that show Keenan Allen is still a valuable dynasty asset. You'll see trades like Keenan for the 106, Keenan and Kareem Hunt and a 2021 first for Aaron Jones and DK Metcalf, Keenan and Hunter Henry for Calvin Ridley and Mike Gesicki, and many, many more just like those. So take advantage of his value now before it plummets this time next year, or you'll be way too late and you'll be way behind the curve on selling Keenan Allen. All right, so the final wide receiver on this list is more so a duo of wide receivers that I would like to talk about. And please do not hate me, throw this in the comments or anything like that when I say this name, but we're going to talk about Michael Thomas. And again, before you turn this video off and do whatever you must, please just hear me out on what I have to say on why I believe that he is a dynasty sell. So Thomas is currently riding high as the most valuable he has ever been in his career, which, I mean, he deserves after a record-breaking 2019 season. Definitely should be the wide receiver one in all fantasy formats. However, there are a couple of things that I could see as potential hits to his current dynasty value that I would like to talk about. So number one, Drew Brees is more than likely retiring after 2020. Yes, we saw what Thomas could do with Teddy Bridgewater last year when Brees was hurt, but the community is pretty weird when it comes to wide receivers with aging quarterbacks or retiring quarterbacks or changing quarterbacks, all that stuff. It's just one more thing that we have to throw into the conversation when talking about Michael Thomas. Number two, Thomas's 2019 was predicated on the fact that he was basically Brees' only target. Last year, he saw a career high 185 targets compared to a previous high of 149 in 2017, and then again 147 in 2018. And in both those years, Thomas finished as the wide receiver 5 and 6 in PPR, which are still great seasons, but they're not wide receiver 1 overall, and not far and away wide receiver 1 overall like he was last year in 2019. Regression is going to come for Michael Thomas, be it in the form of Emmanuel Sanders, a better Alvin Kamara, more efficient Alvin Kamara, more Jared Cook, Taysom Hill for some reason. I don't know, whatever it may be, but he will not repeat what he did in 2019 and in 2020 or even beyond. Number three is that Thomas literally can't go any higher in value. He literally can't. He is the wide receiver 1 overall in dynasty valuation and dynasty wide receiver. He is arguably the number 1 asset with Christian McCaffrey as well too. There is nowhere higher for him to go, and the only place that he can go is back down. This is the ceiling. Sure, he can stay as the wide receiver 1, but again, how much longer is he going to stay at the top spot? And with no Drew Brees, a regressed 2020 fantasy production, and also going to be 28 years old, Michael Thomas probably won't be the wide receiver 1 in dynasty value this time next year. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you should be actively trading Michael Thomas or trying to sell him for less than what he's worth. In fact, you're probably not going to get a 100% value offer for Michael Thomas because people don't want to pay up for him, similar to Christian McCaffrey, Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. These are guys that are they're basically untradeable because people think that they're untradeable because they cost too much. My recommendation is listening to offers at least for Michael Thomas and not just dismissing them because you see on your phone the email notification from MFL or whatever have you. You see that on your side you're giving away Michael Thomas and you just auto reject it. At least listen and hear what these people have to offer for Michael Thomas, because some of these might actually be good hauls for him that you should be paying attention to. And just for an example, here are some examples of hauls that you can get for Michael Thomas using DLF's Trade Finder. So Thomas and David Johnson for Nick Chubb, Juju, and 2 seconds. Thomas for Kenyon Drake, AJ Brown, and a 3rd and 4th round pick. Thomas and Chris Carson for Melvin Gordon, AJ Brown, and DJ Chark. And Michael Thomas for AJ Brown, Cortland Sutton, and a 2021 second. So there are a lot of trades on DLF's Trade Finder for Michael Thomas where I would keep the Michael Thomas side, but sometimes a haul does slip through the cracks, like I said, and you need to capitalize on those offers. Now, I said before that this was a duo of wide receivers that I want to talk about. So the other one that I would like to add into this conversation is Davante Adams. And he has a very similar situation as Michael Thomas right now in that, A, he's highly valued. He has a quarterback that might not be there for too much longer. I know it's Aaron Rodgers. I know he's a lot younger than Drew Brees. He's not talking about retirement, but there are a lot of, there's a lot of smoke coming out of Packers camp, a lot of friction there that's going on between Packers and the coaching staff. They just drafted Jordan Love. They're going to have to play him at some point to justify him as their first round pick. There's just a lot of things going on with Aaron Rodgers that suggest that he might not be long for the Green Bay Packers. Then you also add in the fact that Matt LaFleur wants to add in a very run-first, run-heavy offense with 3 running backs that are capable of doing that with Jones, Jamal Williams, and now A.J. Dillon. And also Davante Adams will be 28 at the end of the season in 2020. So these are all just things to keep in mind when you are owning Michael Thomas or Davante Adams. I'm not saying that you should go out and actively trade these guys, that you should, auto accept any offer that comes in that looks, okay. I think a lot of offers made are lowball offers that I would still keep the Adams and Michael Thomas side, but there are those ones, like I said, that slip through the cracks, and sometimes that they're hauls that are worth looking into and worth accepting trades to move on from some of these wide receivers. So that is it. Those are my top 5 wide receiver dynasty sells that I think that you guys should be actively trading or at least listening to offers on, especially, if you guys listen through the whole thing with Michael Thomas and Davante Adams. Thank you guys so much for at least hearing me out and hearing what I have to say. So if you guys agree, disagree, want to talk about some stuff, you can hit me down below in the comments section. I'm always there. I'm always checking out what you guys have to say, and I'll usually respond and definitely respond if you have some questions or some advice or just some stuff that you wanted to talk about with me. So thank you guys so much for watching and tuning into this video. Please hit that subscribe button, that notification button. I would like to point out, for those of you out there, my analytics on our YouTube page say that 70% of the people who watch our videos are not subscribed. So if I am describing you, please subscribe. Get more content from DLF, which includes my drafting lessons video every single week, the mailbag video every single week, the ADP show with Ryan McDowell and Dan Myler every single week, and then more of these kind of one-offs, and we got more stuff in the works to try and get you guys some more content. I got a new show that's coming out here pretty soon. So I've got the first one lined up. I've got the second one lined up as well too. That's going to be super fun. It's going to have a lot of awesome guests, a lot of awesome analysts that are coming in to talk about some dynasty valuations. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much. Please subscribe, ring that notifications button, like, comment, all that good stuff, and I will catch you guys next time.